Hi, welcome to Polity with Davcat, or Davina, which is me. I'm an Australian, granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, and I'm talking about Trump being a laughingstock because it's always good to laugh at fascists. And I'm talking about the the possibility that there was a man with a gun outside a Trump golf course who didn't even fire a shot, but who appears to have been a nutbag grifter who voted for Trump in 2016 and then tried to encourage Vivek and Nikki Haley with repeated crazy posts asking them to run together. Look, I relate to the crazy because I'm an impassioned person myself who wants to stand up to protect democracy. I just wouldn't appeal to Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy to be the saviors, because they are also, like Donald Trump, con artists who are prepared to trade in their integrity for personal gain. And Trump's willingness to trade his own integrity for personal gain and to sell out this country for personal gain has really taken root across a solid part of the American electorate, which is why I still feel it necessary to bring my voice to this issue every day that I can motivate myself to do so. Because look what we've got here. We've got in this little box over here, I've got what's his face, JD Vance, and today we have the reporting from ProPublica. That's given one name to women who have suffered as a consequence of Republican legislators pushing their so-called convictions, because I don't really think it's solid convictions, but convictions around the need for fetuses to be given legal protection that then reduces women to a lower status of legal protection, because it does that. If you prioritize unborn life inside somebody's uterus, and then that sentient human being has a diagnosis of cancer, severe preeclampsia, has an incomplete miscarriage and is hemorrhaging and needs abortion care as a treatment to stabilize their health, to protect their organ functioning, to not have scar tissue render them infertile, and to save their life from sepsis and heart attacks following sepsis, all the kinds of things that can happen to a woman when doctors can't just administer medical treatment because they have to consider whose life they're going to prioritize the most, because Republicans have tried to introduce fetal prioritization legislation. Then women don't even get to choose themselves. Do I want to gamble with my life in order to potentially save the life of my baby? I mean, an unborn baby cannot grow outside a uterus when earlier than, 23 weeks is kind of pushing it, but I'll say 23 weeks because some medical advances have made it possible for babies to survive in NICU units, neonatal intensive care units in hospitals. But I will also note that in rural areas where people are more likely to vote for a Republican in the executive branch of government, but also at a local level, those Republican rural areas are more likely to have rural hospital closures and to suffer from something called doctor flight, when doctors who are concerned by having their hands tied by legislation that muddies the waters of patient care, that says you can't treat a woman for cancer if she's pregnant, you can't administer chemotherapy, you can't give her radiotherapy, it could jeopardize the life of her child, and she no longer gets to make that choice herself. The choice has been made. It's legislated reproductive coercion, and we now have to definitely gamble with women's lives. They can't make that choice for themselves. You have to wait till she's hemorrhaging enough for you to believe that her life is genuinely in danger. She has to wait in the parking lot until you think her heart rate has reached a point where it is now life-threatening. And that is a gamble, because people's medical conditions deteriorate rapidly. And that's why we now know today the story of Amber Nicole Thurman, a 28-year-old mother of a 6-year-old boy. That boy now left motherless because she could not receive medical care as she was suffering from an incomplete abortion. So she had taken a pill early on in her pregnancy, and there was still some fetal tissue, and it was causing her to experience destabilized health. And when she went to a hospital, they wouldn't treat her, and they waited for her condition to deteriorate further so they could say to themselves, okay, we didn't help an abortion, we're not at risk of losing our medical license or being prosecuted or indicted or even facing jail time. So Amber Nicole Thurman unnecessarily lost her life. The hospital did a review and they've said, was her death unnecessary? Yes, it was. Why did it happen? Because of Republican voters electing Republican officials who weaponize people's sense of protectiveness around unborn babies. And it's a very relatable protectiveness because, look, I've been to baby showers. I got excited the 2 times I was pregnant, and I have 2 healthy children. So I know I'm a very fortunate woman to have not experienced miscarriage, but it's common. Miscarriage is approximately 1 in every 3 or 1 in every 4 pregnancies because it often happens early on. You won't even necessarily hear from a woman that she's pregnant and bam, she's already lost the pregnancy because it's a difficult process. We're biologically complex creatures and some pregnancies don't stick. And depending on how emotionally invested a woman is in her pregnancy at that point, she can be grieving the loss of a future that she's never even mentioned to you, but it will exact an emotional toll. There is so much that women can potentially endure, not only physically, but emotionally, that other people have no clue about. And so while I understand the intentionality of some people who adopt the permission structure of the pro-life movement, the permission structure for voting for Republicans who repeatedly strip funding from women and children, who repeatedly prompt doctors to move states, to undertake doctor flight and leave rural areas and leave red Republican governed states because it would compromise their integrity as a professional. It would compromise their ability to make choices in the best care of their patients, and they leave. And when you get to a certain tipping point of medical professionals leaving, and obstetrician, gynecologist, medical professionals are often married to other medical professionals because medical professionals often marry each other. They meet each other in med school or they meet each other in a hospital. It's a very busy life, particularly when you're in the earlier years of your practice, which correspond to partner finding years. So doctors often marry each other. And if an obgyn is feeling pressured to not be able to deliver patient outcomes that can square with their conscience, they might leave the state, and then their partner will leave the state with them. And then guess what? Reach a tipping point, your maternity department's going to close in your rural conservative area. So white people are being hoodwinked into voting for themselves and voting against their own interests, because it is not just Black mothers who are endangered, it is also white mothers. It is white families and Black families that are ripped apart by the unnecessary early death of a parent. Literally, women's lives being stolen from compromised medical care situations where doctors have, you can't point to it as clearly as you can point to a bullet that takes someone's life, but it is an invisible set of handcuffs on a doctor's ability to decide what treatment to administer to stabilize a woman's care. Let's go into more medical conditions that can occur that women can have when they're going through pregnancy. They can have, I've said severe eclampsia. Have I said placental abruption, when a placenta detaches from the uterine lining and can cause severe hemorrhaging, that if undertreated, if a woman presents and they bleed to an emergency department and they're bleeding and the hospital has to say, you're not bleeding enough, like maybe that's just a bit of spotting, you have to be bleeding more, go home and bleed some more until your life is sufficiently at risk that we will feel that our legal department can bless us treating you and giving you the drugs that will further the miscarriage, bring it to a conclusion and expel all the fetal tissue from your body, saving your life from the sepsis, the elevated heart rate, the pressure on your heart that will occur. And a woman very movingly told her own story when a former Trump appointee and a current Trump employee, John McEntee, who does little, TikTok social media posts that are typically racist and sexist, and he's at a diner and he's eating food and he makes pithy little observations. And he said, where are all these women bleeding out in parking lots that Kamala Harris mentioned during the debate? And women responded, and I might see if I can find this one woman's account because it's so powerful. If you haven't heard it, just watch her stare into the camera and say, me, he said, can they stand up and be counted, these women bleeding out in parking lots? She said, it's me. I was sent to bleed. I was sent home to bleed by multiple emergency departments. And now she's left with arrhythmia, heart arrhythmia. So if people shout at her or she gets too upset or something bad happens, she has to find ways to leave the situation and calm herself down, or she could have a heart attack and die because the electrical patterns of her heart activity has been so disrupted by the trauma that she went through with such heavy blood loss over a sustained period of time because her incomplete ongoing miscarriage could not be met with medical treatment. And that's how complicated biology is, that it's not black and white, that woman's going to live or that woman's going to die. There is a gray area where you just have to speculate. What are her chances of survival? Is it 70% that she'll survive if we just let her continue to bleed? Is it 50% likelihood? What do you think the legislation is implying? Do we have to wait for 99% likelihood that she will die? Imagine doctors having to guess a legislator's intent in that way. Imagine having to guess what a legislature's intent is. How much should we gamble with a woman's life at all? Because my answer is none. And many people's answer, if they realize that this would the question, would be none. Do not gamble with a woman's life at all. If a man turns up to an emergency department with sepsis, with an infection, you will save his life. You will take whatever action you need to save his life. And this is not to deprioritize precious babies and precious children, only to say that if a baby is still growing inside a woman, if a baby is still unable to exist independently, then as the Jewish religion says, and the Christian religion used to be okay with this as well until people found that resegregating American schools was not as popular politically, was not as invigorating politically as they hoped. So they developed this additional agenda that they could use as a cover story for why you should vote for Republicans. Because saying vote for Republicans, we will get black children out of school was too icky to say directly to voters. So instead they said vote for Republicans. We'll protect the precious, precious babies that Democrats want to murder. And it's a mark of gullibility. Hello, darling. You getting something? Could you close the door behind you, sweetie? It's one of my precious children. I had a relatively easy birth, but even then, it sucked and I screamed for hours because women's pelvises are relatively small compared to babies' heads. And your body has to go through a lot of contractions, particularly the first time you give birth. The second time was much easier. And my understanding of what births were like was very much shaped by me being a helpful person to a friend who was going into labor and whose husband was away. And he was on a PhD scoping trip to the Galapagos Islands. Anyways, I was there for my friend and she went through birth. It was the second time for her and it was relatively fast. And I was like, oh, that doesn't seem all that difficult. I can do that without an epidural. So I did. I had my first baby without an epidural. Oh my gosh, so painful, so many hours of screaming. And clearly first baby is harder than second baby, as was confirmed by my second baby who came out much faster, still painful, still, like a day's worth of contractions on and off. You wouldn't want to go through 24 hours of on and off severe cramps every 5 to 10 minutes or so. Anyway, whatever. I'm getting sidetracked, but that's because it's a sidetrack project of mine that I will record something called the Pregnancy Monologues. because I haven't suffered myself that much in my experience. I know it's not the suffering Olympics, but sometimes I'm hesitant to be the first to try and kick off something like this, because my story's easy. But for a pregnancy monologue, in contrast to the vagina monologues, pregnancy monologue, I just want to raise awareness of this shit is hard and should not be taken lightly. Medical intervention should not be taken lightly. And an exercise that they got us to do, oh, dang it, I've got to go. When we were preparing for birth, and my husband and I went to classes, and they said, okay, so here's some cards, and now put them on the floor in order of your priorities. And you had to prioritize that you wanted the birth to go well, or that, you wanted something to go in accordance with your birth plan. And ultimately you realize, yes, you'll absolutely rank your own priorities about how you want the birth to go at the bottom of the pile, because you want to prioritize first that everything goes well for the baby. Like your own wishes and ideas of how things should go, that can go out the window, as long as, fingers crossed, every medical intervention helps you get your baby safely and without any damage to them, because it's a hard passage for a little baby to get their head out of a pelvic canal and through the world, out through a woman's vagina, or out through a cesarean C-section scar. C-section opening scar comes afterwards. Anyway, I've got to go. Just to say, don't forget white people. It's a myth that Republicans are economically competent. Trump's tariffs are a tax on you, and his tax proposals would add massively to the costs of families, because goods would have thousands and thousands of dollars added to them through Trump pretending that he knows what he's doing, and starting trade wars again, massive trade wars with America's trading partners, causing the importation of component parts to be more costly, causing everything to be more costly. And then your out-of-pocket expenses are hugely raised. So the tax burden then falls hugely on middle class and lower income shoulders, whilst he's giving little perks and tax write-offs for private jets, again, to his wealthy coalition in power, and his Elon Musk pals, and his Peter Thiel, and his surviving Koch brother pals. Do you understand, white voters? Trump is not your friend. You don't need white cultural dominance to thrive. It's okay living in a functional, multi-plural democracy. It's actually better for you. And Black voters and the civil rights movements have constantly saved you from yourself over and over again whenever they've been juiced up enough to go and vote for the Democratic candidate, and enough white people have joined in. Because since 1963, and LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act into being, a majority of white voters haven't supported a Democratic candidate. But every time they have at least 40%, then the Democratic candidate wins. So white voters, you're putting on your big boy or your big girl pants is really key to keeping a malicious despot out of office. He's already thrown Americans under the bus so many times with regards to COVID, with regards to kissing up to President Xi of China at exactly the wrong period of history, because he wanted to hide his manufacturing recession caused by his misguided tariff wars. Just think. And just have those, and if you're wise to Trump's malevolent behavior, have some conversations with your on-the-fence friends. People need to be energized and invigorated into getting off their sofas, voting early if possible, voting for the sane candidate, voting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who are not evil communists, baby murdering communists. They're people who want to protect women, protect families from having lives stolen from them, like Amber Nicole Thurman's son, who lost his mum, and Amber herself lost her whole life that she had ahead of her as a mother of two. Okay, I'll say goodbye for now, but take care, tune in again, and don't forget to check your voter registration and take people with you to vote. Thanks, bye.